Today, we're diving into a story that's about way more than just a piece of land. We're getting into one of India's longest and you could argue most defining legal battles, the Ayodhya dispute. It's an incredible story of faith, history, and politics that stretches across 5 whole centuries. And it really all boils down to one huge question. How on earth did this tiny plot of land, just 2.77 acres, become the absolute epicenter of a conflict that shaped a nation? Well, that's exactly what we're here to unpack. So to really get to the heart of it, we're going to journey through 6 key phases. We'll kick things off with the ancient claims, move through the divisions under British rule, cover the conflicts after independence, and then land on the Supreme Court's final landmark verdict. All right, first things first, let's just establish the basics, the land itself, and what makes this dispute so incredibly unique. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. The fight over this single site goes back more than 500 years. That incredible span of time is what makes this one of the most stubborn and complex legal cases in, well, modern history. Now this is where things get really, really interesting. Look at the key litigants. Of course, you have human groups like the Sunni Central Waqf Board, who manage Muslim religious properties, and the Nirmohi Akara, a Hindu monastic order. But the third one? Ram Lalla Virajman. Under Indian law, a Hindu deity can actually be a juristic person, a legal entity that can sue and be sued. So a primary petitioner in this case was literally the infant Lord Ram, represented by a human friend, fighting for the land believed to be his birthplace. Wild, right? Okay, now let's hit rewind and go way back to the beginning to understand the competing claims that really set this whole thing in motion. So the Hindu claim is ancient. It's rooted in texts that identify the spot as Ram's birthplace. And there are reports of a grand temple being built there way back in 57 AD. But the real pivot point comes in 1528. That's when Mir Baqi, a commander for the Mughal Emperor Babur, builds a mosque, the Babri Masjid, right on that spot. And that, well, that sets the stage for centuries of conflict. All right, let's fast forward a few hundred years to the 19th century. The British are in control now, but they don't solve the problem. In fact, their actions kind of cemented the conflict, giving it a physical form for the very first time. This was a huge deal. For the first time ever, a physical barrier goes up right in the middle of the site. This brick wall officially split the space, basically carving the separation between the two communities into stone, or, well, into brick. And here's how that division worked on the ground. Muslims were given the inner courtyard, so they prayed inside the actual mosque structure. Hindus got the outer courtyard, where they worshipped at a raised platform called the Ram Chabutara, often looking towards the mosque. After India finally got its independence, the dispute was still mostly a local thing. But then, one single night in 1949 changed everything. It lit the fuse for the modern legal battle and turned this into a national firestorm. This was the flashpoint. On the night of December 22nd, 1949, someone placed idols of the infant Lord Ram right under the central dome of the mosque. The next morning, Hindu groups claimed a miracle, that the deity had appeared. Thousands of people flocked to the site, and the government, terrified of riots, declared the area disputed and slapped locks on the gates. Just like that, the fight moved from the streets into the courtroom. The central government actually ordered the local official, a guy named K.K. Nair, to remove the idols. But he flat out refused. He basically said, no way, that would be playing with fire, and that no one would risk being called a sinner for removing them. His refusal was a massive moment. It sealed the site's fate, making sure the idols stayed put and that this dispute would now be fought over for decades in court. So for decades, the case just slowly churned through the legal system. But then, the 1980s hit, and this thing was shot out of a cannon, transforming from a stuffy legal matter into a massive nationwide political movement. You had this whole coalition of Hindu nationalist groups start to mobilize. Organizations like the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, or VHP, and the political party BJP really took the lead. They completely reframed the issue. It wasn't just a property dispute anymore. It was a sacred mission to reclaim a holy site and restore national pride. And from there, things escalated incredibly fast. The campaign kicks off in '84. Just 2 years later, a court orders the gates to be unlocked. Then, in 1990, BJP leader L.K. Advani launches his Rath Yatra, a chariot procession that galvanized huge support across the country. And it all led to this, December 6, 1992, when a massive crowd of activists tore down the 16th century mosque. The demolition was a watershed moment in India's history.
it triggered these terrible waves of communal riots all across the country. It was a tragic, violent period that led to the deaths of more than 2,000 people.
So after the demolition, the legal cases just got even more complicated. For almost 30 more years, they wound their way through the lower courts until finally, the whole thing landed in the lap of the Supreme Court of India for a final binding decision. Now, the Supreme Court didn't just pull a decision out of a hat in 2019. Instead, they built their entire judgment on what they called 4 key pillars. They carefully weighed archaeological findings, historical records, evidence of who possessed the land, and the consistency of witness testimonies. The archaeological evidence was absolutely pivotal. The Archaeological Survey of India, or ASI, did this huge excavation. Now, their report couldn't say for sure if a temple was torn down to build the mosque, but it did confirm that the Babri Masjid was built right on top of a large, pre-existing structure that was not Islamic. That finding really weakened the claim that the mosque had been built on empty land. So here's the final breakdown from the court. The entire 2.77 acres was awarded to the deity, Ram Lalla, so a temple could be built. But to strike a balance, the court used its special powers to grant a separate, even larger, 5-acre plot to the Sunni Waqf Board for a new mosque. The Nirmohi Akhwara, for their part, were given a key role in the new temple's management trust. And to make sure all of this actually happened smoothly, the court didn't just leave things to chance. It ordered the central government to set up a trust. This body, the Sri Ram Janmabhoomi Tirth, was officially put in charge of everything: the design, the construction, and the management of the new Ram temple. So the Supreme Court delivered a legal end to one of the most bitter and long-running property disputes anywhere in the world. But the verdict also turns a new page in India's story. And it leaves us with one final thought to chew on. While the court case itself is finally closed, what does this resolution mean for the ongoing story of the nation's identity?